Let it go. While we were talking about that, I was thinking of the OA.
Oh, really?
Because we're kind of talking about like just experiences and stuff, right? And you saw, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, you saw all of them, right? I'm not going to ruin anything for you. The OA is a Netflix show, and I highly recommend it. It's essentially about near-death experiences, or what they call NDEs in it, which is actually a real thing they study in the real world. But the whole show is about near-death experiences and what it brings you, where it goes. Do you go to a different place? What happens? And we might ruin a little bit of the show, so if you really like it, skip past this or go to the clips page, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But on the OA, the near-death experiences is kind of cool because they go to a different place. And you know what's weird? So there's a scene in the show where you know what I'm talking about, where she's like dead and she's like in space.
Yeah.
And there's like the guru up there.
Yeah, it's kind of strange.
Nowhere land where there's kind of stars and it's kind of up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I go there when I do the float tank, when I do the sensory deprivation tank. I
really?
usually end up in a place similar than that. And I did the tank after I watched the show, so maybe my mind takes me there because of that. But when I'm floating and for anyone who doesn't know, the sensory deprivation tank is a float tank with tons of salt. It's a pod. You get in there. It takes all your senses away. There's so much salt that you float on it, regardless of how heavy you are. The water is exactly to your body's temperature. So you don't feel any sense of touch at all. You literally feel like you're floating. They turn off all the lights. It's soundproof. There's a little bit of music to relax you, and then it shuts off. So you essentially, it's taking away all your senses to where you're just stuck there with your mind. Mm-hmm. And your mind will take you to cool places if you let it. If you're freaking out, you probably won't. Laura had a bad time in hers.
Yeah.
But mine's always been super interesting. I've done like 6 or 7 now. Wow. And I always end up, every single float tank, I feel like I'm floating in the ocean. That's how it starts off. And then it gets a little dark because of how dark it is in the room. I feel like I'm floating in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night. That gets a little scary.
Oh, yeah.
But then my brain starts processing stuff. And then it flips. Because there's no weight at all, I lose my sense of gravity. And I know the process of like each time now. And then it feels like I'm floating in the water, but upside down. It feels like I'm floating up, but in the water. Like if I got out of the water, I would, you know what I'm saying? Like if it was upside down.
Like you're facing down,
floating in the sky, and the water's in the sky, and I'm floating that way. Okay. And then that's how I know, all right, I'm in this cool zone where I'm starting to forget what gravity is.
Yeah.
And then in that moment, the water usually goes away, and then I'm floating in this kind of space place, which is what the OA, that moment, it always reminds me of that, where I'm kind of just floating nowhere. And then my brain will start processing stuff. It'll start the random thoughts that pop up when I'm in there, like, I wonder how my job's going, so-and-so at work. And then my mind pushes that to the side. And I wonder if I'm being a good fiance to Laura, and how and then my mind will push that to the side. Yeah. And like all this dumb little things that people think about before they go to bed, if anyone's like me, my brain will process it. And then once it's done doing that, which is about 30 minutes in, which is why I usually always do an hour, the next 30 minutes is heaven. And I've been able to reach some really cool Zen moments in that pod. Just cool. Thinking about life and where it goes. And it takes me to this cool place where I'm just kind of there. I had one, I don't want to get too emotional talking about it, but I had one, I think it was like my 3rd float ever, where I actually saw my father, which was interesting. You know what I mean? So I didn't get to go to his funeral in real life. Me and you talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was actually floating, and my brain just took me to a weird place where I actually like hung out with him, and I was very aware. And like I knew that he had passed, and I knew that it was like he wasn't really there, but I kind of went with it. You ever have a dream and you know it's a dream, but you kind of just go with it? You're like, fuck it, this moment's too cool. It was one of those where I just went with it, and I actually hung out with him, like floating around. And he was just saying like some interesting stuff about like how he's proud of the things maybe my mind wanted to hear that I didn't get to hear because I didn't go to his funeral.
Yeah.
But it was a really cool moment where I got to really find peace. Not complete, right? To this day, I still struggle with some stuff, but it was a cool moment where I found this peaceful moment where I got to hang out with my father a little bit. I think part of it was my brain creating. I'm not saying my dad would have done this for reals in real life. He wasn't the greatest person. Right. But it was cool to have the moment, and it gave my body and my mind this sense of peace. And then when I got out of the float tank, there's like a glow where the world feels kind of weird.
Yeah.
You're just coming off this high almost. I know we kind of drifted from OA into float tank, but it just made me think of that.
No, I love the float tank experience.
How many have you done? A few, right?
I've only done 2.
What were yours? Tell me about yours.
And I can relate totally to what you're talking about how you're kind of getting comfortable in there. And for me, I didn't feel like I was upside down because I couldn't really get my body to fully relax. And I think...
Have you tried the hands up?
Yeah, I tried the different positions and stuff.
That's my favorite, the hands up.
Yeah, and I kind of just surrendered, but I always felt my neck.
There's a neck pillow for that.
Oh,
There's a floating neck pillow that floats around your head, because I had a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I was like doing these breathing exercises while I was in there, and it was so strange. When I got out, I had more of a physical experience. I felt like a bobblehead almost. Like
your body was more relaxed than your head?
I felt like so much energy came out of my neck.
Really?
That my head was light. It was like very light when I came out, like an hour after.
Did you feel anything physical while you were in there, or just when you got out?
While I was in there, I could feel a lot of energy in my neck, in my neck area. Like I was working with it. I was like moving it subtly and just like relaxing, but I could feel it, like a lot of pressure right there in my neck the whole time. But I can also relate to what you're saying about how those second 30 minutes, how you kind of go where it's like, I felt like I was creating my own story as well.
There you go.
And
that's exactly how I felt.
For me, I was in an underwater cave. I was like under a mountain in water, floating like in a cave under a mountain. Like I was
sounds intense, man.
I was in the dark, and it was also scary, but I was just in there. And then I also kind of went on my own journey. Like my mind was like bringing up ideas, and I was kind of accepting them and kind of enjoying like the process of thinking and like taking on those like deeper ideas. Like those bedtime thoughts came in at first, and I kind of like, pushing those to the side. And then I was kind of like creating a story in my head, like, and like going with it.
You almost have to let go a little bit, right? Yeah. Someone that's really in control, like me, that's why it took me to my third time to really have that experience. I think I have a hard time letting go. But once I got a taste of it, like the first and second time, I really was an expert by my third float. Kind of exactly what you said, where I'm like, I'm not going to control this. I'm going to let my mind control it and then just go along for the ride. And it was cool and liberating, because your mind is probably what took me to that moment with my father without without consciously choosing to do that. My brain was like, hey, this is something you need to take care of. Like, this is how I want to do it.
It's almost effortlessly as it arises.
Like I wasn't choosing what was happening. It was just happening, and I was experiencing it.
You can almost feel like if you weren't relaxed or like in tune, you would resist. You would resist these.
I would go backwards a little bit. So my first two times, that's why it was so hard. I would get this cool spot, but then I would be conscious of it, right? I'd go like, oh, I'm at the spot. And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about the spot. Oh, it's going away. It's gone. It's gone. I would lose it. And so the second time I was like, when that happens, just don't do that. And then I lost it a little bit, but less on the second one. And that third one, I got so good at letting go. That's why anyone that does decide to do a float tank, I advise you to do it multiple times, because you kind of become a pro at it, to the point where I know exactly what I'm going to get out of a float, and I can go there and I can get there quicker. I can get there faster than that 30 minutes. But it's exactly what you said.
I really want to do it again.
Yeah. Like, how many? You said you've done twice?
Twice.
To me, that third, so imagine what your third time is going to be like. That third time was the sweet spot for me. And ever since then, like I said, I've been about 6 or 7 at this point. They've all been wonderful since that third time, because I kind of know how to let go now, and I know what it'll bring me, and I know exactly how to get there. You know what I mean? And so it's really cool. It's not everyone has the same experiences, but for anyone that's listening to this that thinks a lot and has a lot of stress, maybe even trouble sleeping, this is perfect for you if you go multiple times, because it really allows you to let go and allows you to just let your mind take you to a place that it wants to be at and deal with it. And your brain, turns out, wants to survive and wants to live. And so it's going to do the most healthiest things. You're probably the reason that your conscious is probably the reason that you're stressing out. Your conscious is probably the reason why you can't deal with difficult things. But when you let your mind do it and you give up control, turns out your mind wants to survive and wants you to be healthy for a long time. So it will actually do whether you choose to or not, it will do exactly and this is my theory, it'll do exactly what it needs to do to be healthier.
That's so interesting. And it's almost because it's like you're getting a break from your ordinary experiences. You're kind of just in this situation where you're like floating in one position. You're kind of out of your normal reality. You're not able to go check your phone. You're not able to do these like constant things that you're constantly doing, repetitive, almost
things that are like stimulating your mind to do things that you don't want it to do.
And they're like instantaneous distractions. and they just continuously distracting yourself. But when you're stuck in this position, you almost have to face yourself. And then you kind of go within, and then your mind starts creating, it starts addressing its own internal things. Mm-hmm. So you're able to like go and address yourself, and your mind actually works with you, and it creates these stories, and it allows you to like look at stuff that actually is meaningful to you, maybe some things that have been troubling you, and it works with those things very efficiently. Yeah. And it like, you get in there and you face yourself, and you and your mind helps you work with yourself, and there's no distractions, and you're just in there on a little journey with yourself.
That's pretty much how it is. Yeah. It's cool. The mind is powerful, man. And it probably is what monks feel, right? People that are so spiritual and at peace with stuff, that they're able to find this cool at this point. And I mean, when you become a monk, I'm sure they know how to do it. They're skillful. Yeah. And so it's a great way. And I'm not telling everyone it's like being a monk in there. I'm saying it's a good starting point. I'm saying it's wonderful to take all the distractions in your life, put them on the back burner, and deal with something different. And it's refreshing. I've never once came out of the float tank and been more stressed out. There was one time where I almost I thought I might crash, because me and Lloyd did one, and we got in the car, and my body and my mind was so relaxed, and we went to hit the highway. And I remember thinking like, fuck that sign. Like, I'm just gonna, like, I didn't want to like drive. Like, I was like, I'll just stop driving. And like, I remember thinking like, all right, you got to get out of this place, because you're going to drive off the side of the mountain. Now? I'm driving, but I was so relaxed that I'm like, I don't want to do it. Like, I felt like letting go and just like being where the car takes me.
You felt like just continuing to float while driving.
I was like, I almost wanted to go back, man. And so it's like, for anyone that does one, probably don't drive afterwards. I mean, I was fine. I nothing ever happened, but just the fact that was there, it would have been nicer just to sit in the lobby and kind of like remember and process. Yeah. But yeah, it was so relaxing, man. It was life-changing. Hey guys, if you're enjoying watching these clips, then head over to the description so you can go watch the entire podcast episode, or go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, search Talk It Up, look for the gold logo, and start watching. Make sure you guys subscribe to this channel as well, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.